to session 2. You're in the Toronto Poet Laureate's tent again. So we're introducing you to poets from Toronto. Later on, you'll get to hear from some poets further afield. So, Voices of Ontario, Essential Voices of Toronto, sponsored by Ontario Creates. So, everybody seemed to be here before, but again, I'm your host, Lillian, Alan, and so it's a great pleasure to, bring you into here as we explore the poetry, the words, the sound, the vibes, and the heart of the city. Because this is what pulses beneath everything that allows us to be creative and to hold on to something beyond the material. Thanks to all our sponsors for this event, City of Toronto, their generous contribution. Thanks for our accessibility sponsors again for this event, Queen's Books, for helping to ensure that Gordon Street is able to keep improving access to its program offerings each year. Now, I have a everybody's special to me, but I have to tell you, this next poet is super special. I met this poet, I can't even remember when, a number of years ago, and we were part of a series existing, and it was okay, but not adequate, and this poet had a vision. She had a vision to start her own series and to open it up to diverse voices, and now I can tell you, the series, Sherry Shab, Shabby Share, see? Oh, it's twisting around. Is just a bold, audacious, and probably the most diverse reading series in the entire country of Canada. Herself, a very amazing and heartfelt, meaningful poet. Goes into corners and areas, not just in our hearts and souls, but in the city that we don't usually get to see and hear from, and how we're connected to a wider world, because many of us have, arrived here at some point or other. So let me introduce to you very good friend of mine, favorite poet, somebody who's around town supporting other poets, Banoo Zan. Banu is a translator, essayist, poet, curator with over 300 published pieces and 3 books, including Songs of Exile and Letters to My Father. She's the founder of Shabashir Poetry Night. I told you about that already, just absolutely diverse monthly series from, that pulls in poets from everywhere, all ethnicities, ages, genders, orientations, abilities, poetic styles. Along with her partner, Cy Storm, she's a co-editor of the anthology Women, Life, Freedom, Poems for the Iranian Revolution, which is going to come out later on this year. But I just want to take this moment just to honor this very special person among us who have come into the city and have helped us to transform the city, make the city more vibrant, more diverse, and make people feel seen and heard, and brought multiple voices to our literary ecology. So thank you, Banu, and can you help me welcome Banu?
Thank you, Poet Laureate, Lillian, Alan, fellow poets on and off the stage, and everyone else who is here to support poetry and words. این ملک یک انقلاب می‌خواهد و بس، خونریزی بی حساب می‌خواهد و بس. امروز دیگر درخت آزادی ما از خون من و تو آب می‌خواهد و بس. This land calls for a revolution, no less. Demands a boundless bloodletting, no less. Today, the tree of our liberty needs to be watered by my blood and yours, no less. Mirzadeh Eshqi, 1894-1924. In the name of Allah, the compassionate, the merciful, I shoot you at close range when you protest bloodshed. In the name of Allah, the compassionate, the merciful, I beat you to death if you claim your body. In the name of Allah, the compassionate, the merciful, I rape you to teach you chastity. In the name of Allah, the compassionate, the merciful, I torture you so you confess to crimes you didn't commit. All I do in the name of Allah, the compassionate, the merciful. And when you turn against Allah, I tear you to pieces as a heretic. In the name of Allah, the compassionate, the merciful, I have turned a God-loving nation against God so that millions are fitting targets of my holy wrath. May God save Allah, as I have damned him forever. The rise of a martyr. At your memorial, the Laureate song echoed on speakers. Daye, daye, vakht jange. Mother, mother, it's time for war. Today would have been your birthday. 40 days before, on the streets of Tehran, dead girl, living God, darkness on fire, your Derafshakavyan, leading the chants, fearless, undaunted, unstoppable. You were the female Kaveh, unlionized in epic. When the dictator's men closed in, revolutionaries dispersed in all directions as shooting stars in a galaxy. And then they were around you, tall, heavy men who beat and threw you into a car. That night, your phone was disconnected. All your photos and videos, dances and singing gone. Today would have been your birthday. The search started in hospitals, prisons, morgues. Days after, your mother received a call. The kid was in our custody for a week. Revolutionary guards wanted to slowly interrogate her. After we built the case file, she was transferred to Evin prison. Then the call came. The family summoned to identify your body. Today would have been your birthday. At your funeral, hundreds were waiting for your coffin that never arrived. Your lifeless body kidnapped, buried in some distant place. But the uprising was where the people were. At your tomb, that was not your tomb. Your mother held up your photo. no tears in her eyes. Today would have been your birthday, but is now your burial day. شهادتت مبارک نیکا. تولدت مبارک. Your martyrdom مبارک نیکا. Your birthday مبارک. She said, he said. January 3, 2024. This morning, they contacted me from the Sharia court to carry out the sentence. I reported to the Public Prosecutor's Office, 7th Division, Tehran, Iran. The guard said, put your hijab on. I said, I'm here to be whipped for not wearing a hijab. The public executioner was summoned. He said, put your hijab on and come with me. I won't. You won't? I lash you so you know where you are. We'll also open a new case file on your dossier. You will be served 74 more lashes. I didn't put it on. The man repeated the command. Didn't I tell you to put it on? I didn't put it on. A woman in chador pulled a scarf over my head. I removed it, back and forth. They handcuffed me from the back, pulled the scarf over my head. We went down to the basement with the judge, the public executioner, and the chadori woman. The woman sighed. I know. The turbaned judge laughed in my face. He reminded me of the rag and bone man in Sadeh Hedayat's Blind Owl. I turned my face away. They opened an iron door to a small room with cement walls, with a bed in the corner, with iron handcuffs and shackles. By the bedside, there was an iron instrument that looked like a painter's easel. The judge asked, how are you feeling, ma'am? I didn't respond. I'm talking to you, ma'am. I didn't respond. The public executioner said, remove your jacket. I hanged my jacket and headscarf from the torture easel. He said, put your scarf on. I won't, I said. Put your Quran under your arm as you should and lash me. The woman came up. Please don't be stubborn. She pulled the scarf over my head. The judge said, don't lash too sharply. The man began. He whipped me on my shoulders, shoulder blades, buttocks, thighs, calves, again and again. I wasn't counting, was singing under my breath. In the name of woman, in the name of life, the cloak of slavery was rent. Our dark night will turn into dawn, and whips will break with the axe. It was finished. We left. I didn't let them think it hurt. We went up to the office of the public executioner judge. I removed my hijab. The woman said, please put it on, and pulled it over my head. The judge said, if you want to live differently, you can live abroad. I said, this country belongs to all. He said, yes, we're not happy either, but it's the law. I said, let the law do what it can. We'll continue our resistance. We left the room, and I removed my hijab.
Thank you. you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Banu. Can we get another hand for Banu? For giving us the tough stuff too. Yes, indeed. Let me introduce to you the next poet, a young voice on the scene in Toronto, articulating in poetic terms some lived experiences of young folks who grew up here. Daniel is also an artist, painter, originally from South Africa. His visual pieces have gained international recognition and featured in galleries across Toronto and collected worldwide. He is making a notable contribution to literature, particularly in the city, and opening up spaces for other voices, young people to see ways in which they can tell their stories. He's just got a new book published and will be available, and he'll be available for signing. So I said, just jump on that if you can. He's also available for workshops. His debut poetry collection is Unwashed, and it's published by Mawenzin House. He's also been featured on CBC and is growing in demand. So just for the words and images and to be in the heart and soul of one of her fellow Torontonians, I present to you up and coming and up, Daniel Maluka.
Hello. Thanks to Lillian, thanks to everyone at Word on the Street, all the organizers. So I'll be reading from my book, Unwashed. I have some copies with me today. So this first one is called Apartment Shadows. We played basketball in the shadows of our buildings, dwarfed by the shadows of older kids. Shadows looming over us and our buildings, swallowing us whole. I left early, but you stayed. In the distant heat of summers long past, we braved the pressure of the beating sun, chasing after the ice cream truck, breathlessly thumbing through quarters, nickels, and dimes. The price of ice cream rose each summer by nickels first, then dimes, then quarters. As the summers blazed on, I would see you go to the tuck shop, using dollar bills to buy nickel and dime bags. I thought nothing of it. Our school day memories play back like videotapes, grainy 240 pixel videos in my head. On your walks to school, your mother wanted you to stay close to her. You didn't, but I did. Misbehaving was more your thing than mine. Running from our mothers was more your thing than mine. You embraced the shadows of those older kids. I didn't, but you did, and stood in daylight with them, circling the area outside of our buildings, like sharks. Thinking nothing of it, I had things to draw. Years lurched on, my visits to your place were rare. Our Call of Duty zombie days were gone. I wouldn't even see you at school. Your father gave a speech at our Black History Month assembly. He told us black men to break the chains. You weren't there to hear it. You left early. I only saw the picture when I asked around for weed and they brought your name up. I didn't know you were chopping. The night I came back from my first art show, I saw you at the bus station. I had moved away, but you stayed. In the shadow of our aged apartment, windows covered by flags and posters. You told me you were selling white because there's no money in green. With no frame of reference, I nodded in agreement. You were still in the shadow of those older kids. Often the place we lived, the neighborhood we shared, comes up in the news. A shooting here, a stabbing there. I would have a quiet moment for you each time. Your father's words ring in my head clear as a bell. Break the chains, black men. You never heard them. Why did you leave early? So this one is called The Navigator. It's also in my book. When I was a kid, I thought my dad was a spy. He could speak French, listen in Portuguese, and ask about the weather in Russian, shocking me and Walter every time our Chrysler Neon needed a tune-up. When I was a kid, I thought my dad was a spy. He spent a few years in France and would avoid questions. Him Sanskrit, me hieroglyphic. We were unintelligible. When I was a kid, I thought my dad was a spy. He knew our city well enough to travel without a GPS, North York, downtown, Etobicoke, but we were unknown to each other. Too many left turns and dead ends. When I grew up, I saw my dad for who he was. Willing to argue over the placement of a garbage bin, willing to ignore the smell of 3 a.m. weed and Bacardi breath. When I grew up, I understood how frustrating it must be to see your son make the same mistakes you did, to have him yield right of way to error, to have your warnings mistranslated. When I grew up, I saw my dad for who he was, aware he sent his son into a world that hates him. So that was The Navigator. This one is called The Assistant Manager. He knew a little bit about everything. The assistant manager could speak on Mourinho's Inter-team, Lucky Dubé, and the ins and outs of tractors. My sister and I were his team, and we were well coached. Weekend shopping trips to Woodbine, Sherway, Sheridan, Bramley. The venue did not matter. We always won. He was more tactically aware than the soccer experts on the score and TSN. I would tell him to audition and show them up. He would laugh it off, as he did most things I said. He would tell it to you straight, no need for bells and whistles. He would tell it to you straight, the way you had to hear it, a firm voice from a warm smile. He wasn't as serious as The Navigator. Humor and sarcasm held his frame together. I held hope I would reach his 6 feet. I didn't. I remember seeing his broad shoulders go down our hallway, headed to work while I slipped out of a dream. Night shift, and I never once heard him complain. Not once. He taught me that manhood was about keeping your word and doing the thing, no matter how hard. He felt like what I imagined an older brother would be. The assistant manager would slip secret $5 bills here and there. $2.50 each, he would say. I would spend my share as soon as I got it, straight to the tuck shop for a $2 surprise bag. You never knew what each one would be. When I hovered above the striped blue and white bags, I was in destiny's hands. You could rip the paper and staples of your bag and look inside first. I never did. I would always stick my hand in and pull out each item. I loved being caught off guard. Leukemia, radiation, St. Michael's. I didn't know what these things were. I wanted to put them back in the surprise bag and staple it shut. I wanted to hand the bag back to the tuck shop owner and never carry it home with me. The assistant manager was big and indestructible. I felt like a titan on his shoulders. He went from stocky and strong to rail thin and weak. His shoulders were no longer travel options. I learned that cancer had a scent. I could smell it on him. The scent couldn't be washed away, not even with my mother's tears. She would go back and forth, St. Michael's and home, home then St. Michael's. How could something so bad happen to someone so good? My mother took care of her brother, like how my older sister would take care of me. We no longer got into formation for our shopping trips. When I would go see the assistant manager, he was a prisoner of his bed, immobile with gaunt cheeks. His hospital room was separated in half with a thin curtain. The smell of the bedpan from the other side hung in my nose and stayed there each subway ride home. His shoulders had become narrower and his whole frame was held together by resilience. Beaten down by radiation, he looked like a small child under the hospital blanket. I hated seeing the assistant manager looking that weak. I was so scared for him. Imagine how scared he must have been. Yet each time we went to St. Michael's, he greeted me with a smile. We couldn't speak for hours about Arsenal and Manchester United anymore. He got tired faster, and I would have to leave his bedside sooner than I would have liked. Yet despite the smell and his condition, he still teased my sister and me, putting smiles on our faces. He was the brightness peeking through the dark curtain that enveloped us. His surprise bag was the worst one you could pick out, but he remained as resilient as Mourinho's Inter team. He never felt sorry for himself. He defied destiny. He taught me that. At last he had broken free from that hospital bed, his body responding well to the treatment. The sarcasm-filled shopping trips with my sister came back. We were a winning team again. Despite all he had been through, he held no bitterness. Not an ounce of anger radiated off him. He taught me so much by not even speaking. He taught me the value of having a role model who wasn't as formal as the navigator. I later realized he had never been weak. The assistant manager remained strong the whole time. So I have about a minute, so I'll read this super short one. It's called Stillness. Wisps of the striding cloud can see all, but the sight of the sun, accompanied by two bowed heads, revealing all in the face of the altar. Elk sear through snow from the mountain spine, with not even a shrug at their presence. Thank you.
Oh wow! So poetry words are in good hands here in Toronto. Thank you, Banoo. All right, another round of applause.
Yeah.
I want to introduce our next reader, and it's a real pleasure for me because people do their poetry differently. There are a lot of people who figure there is a three-dimensional aspect to it and more connection to community, and that if they get an opportunity or they're in a power of privilege, they make opportunities for others. And that doesn't take away from their poetry. In fact, their poetry becomes more enriched and more meaningful to other people. And I've known this poet for a long time, who's worked with a number of people around language acquisition skills, organized poetry reading series that brought a number of diverse poets into the scene and supported them, made them felt seen. Writing her own work and sharing it. And now I'll go to the formal one. Our publications include our poetry collection, Atom Bomb Nostalgia, one of the best new poets in Canada. Individual poems and stories appeared in Temenos, Prison Review, Dovetail, Bad Dog Magazine, and the Journey Prize Anthology. A new manuscript of interconnected poems entitled Change is currently under submission. So any publishers out here, I say, gather it. I'll even volunteer to be the editor. She launches writing in English. She teaches writing in English literature at the University of Toronto, and for many years produced a poetry salon, among other things. Her salon is Wild Writers, starting in Kensington Market. She now holds poetry and arts event at the historic Foy House on Isabella Street, and I've had the opportunity of going there and find it to be such a welcoming and relaxed places for people of diverse sexuality, gay and lesbians, and people of diverse sexualities, and everybody else. Just a very creative hub and wonderful. So, help me, without much further ado, welcome Señorita You got that now, eh? Hardly, yeah. But the wonderful Georgia Wilder.
Can I use this? Oh yeah, that works. All right, great. Thank you so much. So my name is Georgia Wilder, and I'm reading from my new collection of poems called The Change, which is an interconnected series of poems. And I've changed the order a little bit. I'm just reading a little selection from it. I've changed the order so that the first poem is, one that I'm going to read first is in honor of truth and reconciliation. It's called The Glass Tower, Winnipeg. When I'm at the Forks, I remember you most. Window glass tower exposing surveillance, hiding nothing or all, transparency or erasure. No guards to track you in their crosshairs, no missing children, no hanged man. Remember how we parted in Montreal under Sir John A., founder of the Indian Act, bronze of a Scotch drinker's nose, pigeons painted his temples, red vandal paint bombs scourged his feet. Beneath him we found slight shelter to light our cigarettes, your mouth glowing an O, blowing smoke signals. You laugh, oh, Canada, oh, Métis. Stiff-necked after sleeping 3 nights on a bus, you came to the Forks, land of the Northwest Rebellion, land of your history's ghosts. You necromanced the river of red dresses and undercurrent, emptied of your sister, filled by the wind. I heard today she found you. I am jealous. I miss you. A monument cast from laughter, a taste of smoke on your lips, a history that holds your name. I'll just continue and I'll just sort of let one roll into the other. Bare feet and leeches, scrying into black water, the place of my nascent terror, a face gazes up. She, pentimental business in the night glass of lakes, showed through of fishnets, undulating freshwater weeds, small pale toes. She warns against necromancy, against dredging the bottom, for small lives engorged by my childhood blood. I am space traveler. Metaphors define isolation, airless drift in a star-salted sky. I came from another planet, unlike others of my kin. My fear is not of the strange, but of the estranged. My own family composed of different species. The church of my golden-haired siblings orders their lives, a devotion of patient women, a sobriety of roast beef dinners and clean kitchens, while I, dark and rebellious, hitchhiked through the Rocky Mountains to the sea, searching for a woman from Thunder Bay who cut my hair and saved it, and I seduced her, a face eventually remembered after hours of nothing but staring into space. The change, furious, storm swells, night sweats, word loss, gaping and angry, bites, heat raging long after the blood-dried cold. A clockwork biology urged to be sanguineous, relevant, fast, convertible, wild against the death drive. Passing the crash, thrills, the fear of the near miss, the explosion of nature inciting fecundity, backyard cat yowls, the wetness of seed pods, a tadpole brimming stream. Whirlpool vortex turns the carnival, earth death spin, time warps. We think of nothing. We think nothing of candy floss, dandelion, silk parachute, wishes we blow away. Clutch and slip scorching, tarmac, long hair whipping our faces as if this moment were important. As if we were more than dogs, muzzles euphoric against the wind. The driving force. In frozen fog, everything slips, lost word blown, deadline skidding into the rumble strip. I am guilty. I remember the blood, but I remember the fire only in shame that cannot be spoken. In the rites of spring, inevitable April, tax deadlines and death, out of Shakespeare, Lincoln, Martin Luther King, my grandfather, who still percolates coffee on a wood stove in lucid dreams, the titanic sinking feeling of underwater entrapment lifts and the surface is a glass boat with a glass ceiling, a final ice storm of April crystal casings in a snow-white glass coffin trap, waiting for a spring in Hitler's birthday crash, a genocide of frozen buds, premature nests of stillbirths, the waiting for snowdrop flowers, for hyacinth blooms and lilacs as the ghosts of winter hangs, speech bubble complaints, hanging them in fog, thoughts in frozen air, and waiting. Waiting to be transported on Einstein commuter train, their platform gray as concrete clouds, as perforated roads, all mud puddles, leaking boot slush, and spring light pinkening damp skies, plum lung phlegm waiting, throats muffled and wool stench, and menthol rub, swallow raw throat pain. I chew my ragged lips until they bleed, until my face flares to fever, until I bored find a seat where someone looks back with cross-hatched lines around her eyes, whose skin wobbles under the chin, but nothing has happened. Worry becomes addictive, a thing like pleasure, a thing like satisfaction. Thank you. Of biting ragged lip and cuticle skin, the tiny bloodletting remedy traps where the speeding train does not even ease this waiting. The girl on the shoreline, skinny with long hair, snow-white skin, freckled, show-through, she would appear year to year, high forehead, leggy with grace and good bones, waving around the rocky point, sundress bunched to her waist, or shinnying up birches, over fences, or through barbed wire in cutoffs, older than me and a swimmer. From a campground strung with patio lanterns, her parents' Airstream camper, a silver spaceship or bullet, I thought she was magic, catching the frog king, putting him in my pinafore left pocket as an act of love. When I found her again, abuzz with boys, she denied she had ever met me. I cried, recalling the frog king limp and heavy lying in my pocket. Finally, memory gyre. Spinning undercurrents pull silent in dream sleep, a watcher beast, silvery beneath hungry smells, bodies left swift, sees in these shadows the motion of swinging prey. In the village I left behind, a game warden killed off the ling in decades before I was born. A reeve brought fishers with wolverine teeth to eat feral cats, porcupines, slow raccoons, one unlucky teacup poodle. When you see the lake laid out at rest, I will tell you how my pale brother, toddling behind me, barely splashed, and I had barely nudged him, sank straight down, how the surface snapped shut above him, my parents suddenly buzzing and biting like deer flies, broke the plate glass surface, snatched him from one sinking depths of my 6-year-old afternoon, and birthed him again into the breathing world. I just want to thank everyone so much, and thank Lillian and also Daniel and Banu. It's such a pleasure to meet with you.
We'll just have one question, maybe two if we can get away with it, but we have like 5 minutes. It's always time, yeah? As Rasta said, there's no time in Babylon. So we should just go on. So again, it was, just beautiful to hear voices coming from, our communities. Can we get another round of applause? So I'm going to ask The same question we asked the poet laureates. When did you come to poetry? And I want to add, what was the first poem that was impactful for you? Or something that appears in a form that wasn't called poetry, that was impactful for you, that you knew you could do it, and you loved it, it resonated with you, and that you may become a writer of poetry too. I'm going to start with you.
Oh, thank you. I think that I came to poetry because it was read to me when I was a fussy child. It impressed me, and I tried to stay awake to hear more of it. My mother's favorite poet was the American poet Longfellow, and one of the things that I asked her to read to me over and over again, although it's not, it's a very controversial poem today, and speaks very much of a false legacy, is Longfellow's Hiawatha. But the sound of it was so beautiful to me, and I tried to learn the words, and so it was something that really stuck with me, its rhythms and its sounds. When I was young, when I first started school, there were lots of contests for poems. And you could win $5 or $10 or something if you entered a poetry contest. And no one else was that excited about writing anything. So I would write and win, and like I had these really awful, like rhymey poems, but it actually inspired a confidence that has carried on regardless. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Daniel, same question.
I would say I was always into writing. I was always into reading. I used to read with my mother and sister books that I took from our elementary school when I was really young. They had these like Franklin the Turtle books that had like cassettes with them. And I'd listen to the cassette and I'd read along, and I loved it. So it was always a thing of mine. It was always in the back of my head that I wanted to write and have stories written and such. But poetry was pretty like accidental. I wasn't really into poetry when I was a kid, more so fiction. When I was at TMU, formerly Ryerson, Professor Paul Wynn, in our writing class, she was giving me higher marks on the poetry, and I didn't understand, and I'd asked her, like, why, what is this? I'd rather do fiction. And she said, oh, it's just that your poetry is more interesting. So since then, I've always been kind of like dipping my toes in and out. And I remember the conversation I had with her, I said, yeah, but like I don't really have interest in this art form. She told me that the art form picks you. So since that conversation, it's always been an increasing part of my life. Yeah.
Banu.
Thank you. Well, I come from Iran. And in Iran, if you are a reader, you read poetry. You know, a typical Iranian bookshelf is 80% poetry books and 20% other. So, and I read a lot of poetry, and I had thousands of lines of classical poets by heart, including Hafiz, Rumi, Nizami, and Vahshi Wafdi, and many, many others. I devoured books of poetry, and I had a good memory to remember lines of poetry. But then what made me a poet was when we were kids, you know, I have two sisters younger than me, not much younger, like this, the age difference is not that much. So our father had bought us 3 little chicks, and so we kept them in our sitting room. One winter morning, we woke up and they're all dead. And so I told my sisters, let's write a poem about it. I remember we went to our dad's room, and the only person, of course, who wrote the poem was me. And then I left it between my books and my shelf and forgot about it. My mother, she was very much into the fact that we should succeed at school, so every night she would go through our books, our bags, to make sure all the books, the textbooks were in the bag, so we're not missing on schoolwork. So she was going through the shelf, and she discovered the poem. And she took the poem to school and told the school principal and people, my daughter has written a poem, don't you want to encourage her? And of course, to my embarrassment, they asked me to write it on a big, cardboard piece of, and then they put it on the classroom wall. And I kept reading and I kept writing, and nobody had to encourage me to write poetry in Iran. If you write poetry. Again, that's the first thing that you write. And then later on, of course, I read other things and other works in translation. For example, I had heard the name Shakespeare, and I thought, well, I read some of the translations, and I thought, well, is that Shakespeare? If that's Shakespeare, Al-Hafiz is much better than him. Which is true, because when you read poetry in translation, now I translate poetry, but honestly, getting a good poet, doing them justice in translation is not easy. But then later on, when I went to university, I studied English literature, and the reason was I wanted to read Shakespeare in the original. And then when I read him in the original, after that I said, well, I can't compare. They're both great in their own ways. And I will stop here. I don't know if I answered your question.
Oh, no, great, fantastic. All right, well, thank you so much. I just wanted to add that, nowadays we have a lot of young folks who are writing poetry, but they're not reading. So you must read, so encourage them to read. They only read their own poems. And, they have to read what they love and read what they don't. I remember when my daughter was growing up, I would say, I don't care what you're reading, you just have to read. And that was the deal we made. And the librarians are noticing that people are coming in less to take out books. I mean, the other stuff is fine, but it should not, replace actually going in and having the books in your hand and engaging with the consciousness of other people. I mean, that's one of the ways we connect as human beings. So I just want to thank you. Any quick last comments here? Any comment from the audience? Maybe you can bribe your young people to read. Read
some poems.
Yeah. All right, well, time thing, but thank you so much for your words and your work, and for being in our city and being family to all of us who, want to share love and peace and goodness. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bookstore next door if you want to purchase a book, or from the author if you want a book signed. That would be excellent. Thank you, thank you, thank you.